Okay, hi. Let's talk about RF Kuang. So I recently read Katabasis. I'm not sure how to say it. I recently read RF Kuang's newest novel, and I was less than thrilled. It got me thinking about RF Kuang as an author, and so I wanted to chat about her writing. I want to be able to answer the question of if RF Kuang is the correct author for you. I've done this for Altessa Moshfegh, for Sarah Waters, maybe for other authors as well. I don't recall at the moment. And so the goal of this video is for you to kind of use to determine if RF Kuang is the right author for you. I'm going to do a little synopsis of each of her books. I am going to talk about the Goodreads ratings. I'm going to talk about my ratings. I'm going to talk about themes within her novels, and then I'm going to kind of point you to which book might be the best for you, and if she's even the correct author for you, or if she's just worth skipping for you. It feels a little bit premature to me making a video like this, but I have read all of R.F. Kuang's works up to this point. She came on the scene not that long ago. Her first book was published in 2018, and as of now, in late 2025, she has published 6 novels, 3 of which were in one trilogy, the Poppy War trilogy. So while RF Kuang has a lot of time, she is not even in her 30s yet, to change her writing style, to hone in her skills, to find a different niche. I still wanted to make this video now so that you could understand her at least current writing and see if she is the right author for you. I'm going to go in chronological order of releases. So the first that I'm going to talk about is the Poppy War trilogy. I actually have it right here. The Poppy War trilogy is obviously 3 books: The Poppy War, The Dragon Republic, and The Burning God. And I am not going to talk about each one of them individually, obviously, but the story itself follows Rin, who becomes an anti-hero. And she is born in a poor province to a family who is not where she's living with a family who is not that great to her. And she is trying to find her way out of the life that is set up for her. So she studies very hard to try to get into a very prestigious academy. She meets a lot of people on her journey. She makes a rich best friend, and she makes an enemy that is also very wealthy. She has a goofy mentor. It has a lot of elements that you expect to see, tropes you expect to see in fantasy series. It is also very, I would consider it in the subgenres of high fantasy, grimdark, and military. So if you do not like reading battle scenes, this is not the right book for you. If you do not like pretty dark energy just constantly through the book, this is also not the right book for you. The book itself, and I am taking this from the Wikipedia article because my Chinese history is not good. It is heavily inspired by the events within the Second Sino-Japanese War, and the context or the historical setting of it is inspired by the Song Dynasty. So it has more. It feels like a little bit more ancient in terms of the setting. But then there's also elements of magic involved as well. This series does meet a lot of like the check boxes of like a debut. It suffers from pacing issues throughout it, though I would say that the sum of the books is larger than the parts. So I don't think that the pacing from a book to book perspective is necessarily the best. It slows down and then it speeds up. There's just chapters where nothing happens, and then there's explosions of content. And I think that could be a little challenging for people. I think that a lot of people also come into the series, or did at the beginning, thinking it is going to be like a military academy. Fantasy, and that element is very small in the grand scheme of things. The war looms, and those elements disappear rather quickly within the first book. If you don't like following an anti-hero, I also don't think that this is the greatest book for you. I'm talking a lot about the negative aspects of this, but overall, I personally quite enjoyed this series. I love an anti-hero. I don't mind the pacing issues. I really liked the angst on the page. I liked the conversations about classism and colorism that were occurring within it. So for me, I enjoyed this series. I haven't gone back to it since I finished it, but I had reread the first book before I dove into the whole series. Okay, after she finished this trilogy, her next book was a standalone fantasy called Babel. So this is a historical dark academia with fantasy elements. It takes place at Oxford, and you are following a protagonist who joins a part of the academy that is about magic. So this, at the heart of it, has what I find to be a really interesting magic system. It is the combination of the use of silver and the use of language, and that when you translate, there's something lost in the translation. A translation in itself is not word for word. So where that gap lives between language and meaning, there's magic. And that magic can be harnessed through the use of silver. I found that concept to be really interesting. And if you do find that interesting, there is a academic setting where that's explored. So there's a lot of philosophic conversations at the beginning of the novel that are happening in the classroom. In terms of the context of the characters, you're following one main protagonist, but it's a cohort of 4 individuals who don't fit in some capacity. So the protagonist is mixed, and he's Chinese, but he's in some Chinese and white, and in some contexts he appears white passing. His good friend is, I think, Southeast Asian and is not white passing. There is a black woman that I believe is French, and then there is a white woman. And they all develop like a quick and like tight friendship within this academy. There's a lot of thematic content around colonization, colonization of language, colorism. Colorism is a theme in both the Poppy War and in this standalone. This takes place at Oxford, so in the context of the thematic content of the colonization and colonization of language, there's also conversation about colonial institutions and how those have impacts on a global scale. And in terms of the themes, this, for me, is her best work. I think that it is still very on the nose, but there is a lot of different thematic content that she's laying throughout the book and looking through different lenses. And I think that all of that comes together and blends really well with the story in the context of when and where it's happening, and in the context of the magic system that she developed. I will say that this book also has some strange pacing. This one, it's less of a pacing issue and more of like, she likes to 180 you in the middle of the book. So you think that you're heading in one direction and that this is gonna be your location and the context of the characters in this, and then she pivots you. And if you don't want that pivot to happen, I think it can be very jarring. For me, it was fine. It worked enough in the context. I like the first half of the book much more, but that shift did not make me dislike the book in general. Her next book is Yellowface. This is, I would say, the biggest change in that it is not a fantasy novel. It's still very theme heavy, but I found this to be more of like a satirical conversational horror. And very, very, very modern. So her last books were very historic. She was pulling themes from a historic lens. This is a modern novel talking thematically about modern themes. So you're following a protagonist who is white, and she acquires the manuscript of the novel of her frenemy, I would say, who is Asian, and starts to take the book on as her own. It's first person, it's very conversational. You're in her head, and you're in her head as she's justifying to herself why this is acceptable, and how actually with all of her editing, it's really just her book. If you know about RF Kuang in any capacity other than just reading her books, it feels extremely meta and extremely coded to her being that Asian Asian character that gets her book stolen. It is so on the nose with its themes that they're kind of being just lobbed in your face, and that is, for me personally, where kind of the limit lies. I don't mind if you put your themes in my face a little bit, but like I want it to be a little bit more subtle. I want to do some of the guessing. And here it just felt like we're going to talk about colorism, kind of, but through the lens of, can a Chinese writer write about a Vietnamese character, or is that doing Vietnamese face? It's a lot of her pondering where the limits lie in what you can and can't write. And it feels to me that a lot of this is her trying to grapple with the critiques in the media about herself. And for me, it just did not work very well. Okay, so now we're on to her most recent release, which I believe is pronounced Katabasis, though it could be Katabasis. I'm not sure. This is another academia, kind of. You are following a protagonist who goes to Cambridge, and it is historic but more modern than Babel. So that takes place, I believe, in the 1700s. This takes place in like sometime between like the 1960s and the 1990s, I think. And you're following a female protagonist who is in a like a master's or PhD program of some capacity that has to do with magic. It is a different style and different type of magic than what is in Babel, so these are not happening within the same world. And her advisor died, and she's going to hell to find him. And she ends up with a sidekick of a character, and who shows up and decides to go to hell with her. And there's clearly animosity between them. And so it's them wandering through the layers of hell, trying to get through them to find their professor. Personally, I found the world building within this setting to be lacking. I could not tell you what the magic system really was, except for it was logic driven and it required chalk. It's not used a ton within the book. It is definitely used, but not a lot. You don't get the philosophical elements of the magic system that I really enjoyed of Babel, that you get being in the context of an academic text, or a text that is surrounded in academia and is immersed in academia. That is not really present. And then you're in hell for most of the time, and I couldn't tell you what hell really looked like. It was the world building itself for me was lacking in that my imagination couldn't really fill in the cracks of the setting. So for me, it was just two people wandering through kind of gray space, and then something would happen and they'd be on the water or they'd be in an institution, and suddenly like these things would appear. And I could never get like the lay of the land. And part of that was the point, because it could change, and like it's hell, so it's not solid in its makeup, but it also just felt like she didn't really know what she wanted it to be like, because at the beginning it was an academic institution, but then they're on like trails in like the middle of nowhere and there's no buildings around, so it wasn't an academic institution. I just found the world building to be lacking. The plot in this one is a quest. They are going through hell to find their advisor. And quest novels are at the root of fantasy. There's so many of them. And so many of them, in my opinion, are done very poorly. It is really hard to get your characters to be moving through space with a very specific final goal in mind, but have the other things that come along the way be interesting in building to that final goal. I think that it takes like a good author's hands to do this. And for me, she just wasn't the author. It was very plodding. So whereas some of the pacing things in other ones felt like she slowed down and sped up a lot in the Poppy Wars, or in Babel, it was like a huge jump in the narrative, and that just can be a challenge as a reader if you're not expecting that. I think with this one, it was just, it didn't build. I need a quest novel to build as it goes, and you can't just have this thing happen, then this thing happen, then this thing happen. And we weren't really getting much of that. You are getting a lot of backstory of the her relationship with the other man who shows up with her, and their relationship through time, and her relationship with the advisor through time. So I liked that was interspersed in the novel, because you're just, at the beginning, she's just ready to do this, and then you start to see the layers of complication from like a emotional and psychological perspective that going on this quest is presenting. And so from that context, I thought that was done well. This book is very logic heavy. So for those that never studied logic in academia, which I can't say I did a lot. I took a class in college within the Philosophy Institute that was a logic class. So if A, then B. It's like logic through the lens of almost like math, like formulas of logic. And so that is very much at the heart of this. I personally enjoyed that class and liked the logic class. It felt very... it was very simple for me, like it all clicked. The people around me when I took that class hated it, didn't understand it. So I think that like I read this book and I thought the logic parts were boring, and I took a class in college about logic and enjoyed it. So, and I was like an outlier. So I think through that context, I don't know how many people are actually going to like the magic system here, because it's on logic and fallacies and the utilization of fallacies, but like also drawing symbols, and it doesn't tie together. And my experience is that people find logic confusing and boring as it is. So I just really don't know how this is gonna hit for a lot of people. Another thing is that they're going through hell, and there's a lot of like contextual elements to hell, and like Dante's hell, and different peoples and philosophers and ideology around hell, and like the levels of hell. And then the levels of hell are just that. And so for me, I would have liked that as a quest novel where you're building to something, you are getting meaning out of those levels of hell in some capacity. How it relates to you, how it relates to the advisor, how it relates to the magic, how it relates to a cataclysmic event that got us to where we were. And it really just felt like none of that was pieced together, and it had so much potential, and it was just not utilized. And my last thing I kind of mentioned, but it's just not super magic focused for magicians being your protagonists, which I think that people would just expect and want. So as you can tell, this one's the freshest in my head. I just read it, so I probably talked about it for the longest, and I didn't really enjoy it. So let's talk about the themes in her writing. So clearly, academia is a huge theme in her writing. That is a theme in her life as well. She is seemingly consistently within academia, and it seems that there is a blend of that between her writing and her real life. So there's an academic setting in the Poppy War. There is an academic setting at the Heart of Babel. There is an academic lens through which Yellowface is written, given that the protagonist is an author plagiarizing another author. And then you have Katabasis, which is also taking place kind of in academia, and the trials and tribulations of being a PhD student in academia. Another theme that I find within her novels a lot of the time is colorism. So in the Poppy War, Rin is dark-skinned, and in the richer province that she goes to, everyone is very pale. There is a lot of conversation around colorism, and kind of that also ties into the magic system as well within that story. There's colorism, like I said, at the root of Babel. I would say that is one of the main themes within that. There is colorism in Yellowface, clearly, just by the name of the book. The one that does not have this is Katabasis. Okay, another thing, pacing. I talked about it a lot, but pacing is something that I think at some points in these books is an editorial issue, and in other parts is just the way that RF Kuang chooses to write. And you're either going to take it or leave it. You're going to enjoy the way that she 180s your story, or you're not. I think another thing, which is a little bit more meta, is, and this sounds kind of obvious, but hear me out, is that you're reading the book that she wants to tell you. You're reading what she's interested in. You're reading what she is studying about. And I think that could be problematic if you know the stuff she's talking about. And I am going to use a really dumb example. So in Katabasis, the protagonist at some point has to climb a wall, and she's thinking about how she used to rock climb. While I don't rock climb now as nearly as often, I consider myself a climber. I started climbing when I was 11, and so that's 20 years of my life. So I have spent a lot of time in climbing gyms. I've spent time outdoor climbing. I've been a part of climbing communities in different parts of the country. I consider that to be a part of my life. And I could tell that she is not a climber and that she maybe talked to climbers, maybe went to a gym to get the feel for what it's like to climb. But she learned about a thing, and it was a superficial learning, and she wanted to incorporate it into her text. And I could read that through the lens of climbing because I know that I know it. And it made me wonder, if I knew about these other topics that are arising in her book, would I have the same reaction that I had to the climbing, where it's like she wants to show you everything that she learned, and it almost feels like a show and tell, as opposed to a way of framing a narrative. So now let's get away from my thoughts. Let's go to the masses. Let's see Goodreads. So I'm going to show her rankings, in order from lowest rated to highest rated. So her lowest rated is Yellowface with a 3.73. This also has the highest reader audience, so it's not as surprising that it's lower down on the list. Her next one is Katabasis at 3.87, followed by Babel at 4.15, which leaves the top three to be the Poppy War trilogy. I found that a little bit interesting given that the first book in a trilogy is always like lower rated than the rest as readership declines, and it's only the people that are enjoying the series for the most part that continue it on. So at number 3 is The Poppy War, the first book, with a 4.17. And then at number 2 is book 3, The Burning God, at 4.29. And then at number 1 is The Dragon Republic at 4.35. So now I'll give you my personal ratings. Just as a caveat, I am not rating each book from the Poppy War individually. Like I said, I think that the series itself is greater than the sum of its parts. So I'm going to only be giving 4 ratings. So in my last place position is Katabasis. I don't think that's shocking. In my third place is Yellowface. And then in my second place is the Poppy War trilogy. And my favorite is Babel. Yeah, I truly, really enjoyed Babel. Okay, so enough about what I'm thinking. What about what you would be interested in? So I kind of already alluded to this in the themes of the books, but we'll go through them book by book. So if you're looking for academia, which is one of our main themes, my recommendation is to go for Babel. I think it's her strongest look at academic institutions. It's the best one to actually be immersed in academia. The magic system in the academia work really well together. Overall, it's going to be the best book for that. Probably my favorite dark academia book I've read, though I don't really search those out. Just don't read Katabasis for that. Like, honestly, it's worse in every way imaginable. So if you are looking for something super modern, culture heavy, like a modern culture heavy critique, that's going to be Yellowface. If you like high fantasy and you do not mind military fantasy, like a battle, it has magic, but it's a battle. You're seeing line by line action. You're talking about the logic and strategy behind the war itself, and you don't mind an anti-hero, or you like an anti-hero, and you like grimdark, then the Poppy War trilogy would probably be a good one for you to attempt. I think that when it comes to military fantasies, I don't pursue them, but I have read some, and it has a setting and themes that I don't typically see present in other military fantasies. And if you don't like theme-heavy fantasy and you need a fast pace all the way through, or you need a consistent pace all the way through, or you don't like a surprise in the trajectory of a book at any random time, she just might not be the author for you. Okay, now, because she's a modern author writing now and is going to probably keep writing, I kind of want to talk about her future and like what I hope to see with her future, because clearly I have read all of her books, which means I am following her in some capacity as an author and appreciate her work in some capacity. This is my own personal thoughts of what I would like to see. So I guess that this should come as no shock, but based off of my ratings, but I have liked her last 2 books the least, and I personally found Katabasis to be highly disappointing in terms of it was like RF Kuang turned on low volume. The themes were not there. The world building was completely missing. it was just not as good as her other works. It felt in ways like this was an earlier work that then got published later. Like it felt like a decline from her capacities. So I hope that she continues to expand her themes in the exploration of themes, because that for me is what I enjoy a lot about her writing. And I hope that through time, through learned lived experience, she becomes more nuanced consistently in her approach to her thematic content within her novels. I like the fact that she is an author or a person, it seems, that gets gripped by something and just wants to dive in. I would like to then see more of it feels like maybe like a rooting and a deepening of the experience of that dive into something, into a way where her conversation around that topic becomes more subtle and nuanced and gives the reader a lot more time to explore it in their own head instead of throwing it all at the reader. I hope that her editors continue to hone in on the pacing issues, and she is able to have like those conversations with her editorial staff on kind of tightening up her narratives, because I do think that there is fluff that does not need to be there. And obviously I have no idea why it makes it into the book, but I think that like trusting editors or putting yourself into the hands of good ones could really help her in the long run. Okay, my last one is that I hope that she stays creative. Katabasis felt like it wasn't as creative. It felt a lot about like writing what she was learning about. And I hope that academia doesn't become a crutch in her writing. I would like to see the learning, the constant learning, which I love and I empathize with. I feel like I'm a constant learner. I love learning new things. I hope that for her, those things that she's learning about can become the foundation, and her creativity seeds on top of that instead of the foundation building it. I hope that I'm really going deep with this metaphor, I guess. I'm hoping that her academic learnings can become the foundation in which she seeds her own creativity on and builds something out of. That is not what Katabasis felt like. I think that that might be present in some of her other novels as well, and they were just a little bit better constructed. I think that she should always trust her own creativity and not just put faith into the things she's learning about. And that is, I guess, all I have for this video. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on her as an author, and maybe other authors that are similar to her. I sometimes do that in these videos, but I couldn't really think of any that I wanted to highlight here. So that is all I have. So until next time, happy reading.